microphone is on mute to avoid audio feedback issues. While joining audio via computer is highly recommended, if an individual loses audio, they can call in separately using the Zoom conference number.
Thanks, Heidi.
I think I made it. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay.
Yay. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all. And now I can see that we do, in fact, have a quorum. So Elizabeth, did you want, I'll call the meeting to order, and can you take roll?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ryan Harrison. Judge Kristen Rosie.
I am here.
Heather Anderson.
Here.
Novella Coleman.
Here.
Sarah Good.
Present.
Michael Rhodes.
Here.
Shalak Richards. Angelica Salceda.
Here.
Stephanie Santoro.
Here.
Sal Torres.
Present.
And we have quorum. So I will also just call out roll for our liaisons. So Pat Lee. Judge Dulcich.
Here.
Kenneth Wang. Okay, and then our Board of Trustee Liaisons, Christine Gonong. Mark Tony. Okay. So we can go to public comment now.
Okay. Are we expecting the Board of Trustees liaisons later?
They did not indicate they would be joining.
Okay. All right. So this is the part of the meeting. If there are any members of the public who wish to make a public comment, now is the time to do that. And you can do that by raising your hand. And Elizabeth, you can probably see if there's anybody on who is doing that.
There isn't any member of the public that has indicated they would like to make public comment at this time.
Okay.
Oh, and I'd also, sorry, now that I have the full screen in front of me, I see that Leah Wilson, our executive director, has also joined us.
I see that too. Good morning, Leah.
Thank you.
Okay, so no members wishing to make public comment. We'll move on to the chair's report. Ryan obviously is not here, but I'm honored to take his place this morning. It is lovely to see all of you. I will just share a few brief things. The first is that I really hope, so today marks about 2 years and 3 days since the last time that COAF met in person. It was in fact Valentine's Day in 2020, the last time that we all got to see each other in person, or at least we saw some of us in person. We were split between San Francisco and Los Angeles that day. I really hope that in the months to come that we actually get to see each other again and sit across the table. Sadly, we won't be able to have specialties, cookies and sandwiches, at least up here, but something where we can be together. It is nice to see you all on the screen, and it is effective in all of those things, but not being able to sit across the table from Sal or Ryan in San Francisco, and I'm sure that Heather feels the same way about seeing people in LA. It's just not the same. There is something about seeing each other, hanging out together, sharing a lunch together, swapping sodas and sandwiches and cookies together that that forms a bond that it is harder to form on Zoom. And so I really hope that the next time we do this, we can actually be together. And I mean, some of you I've never seen in person. So it feels a little crazy that we've been doing this together. So I just wanted to send that out into the universe and see if we can't make that happen for us in the months to come. I will add some comments as we go through the meeting, but there's not a lot that I wanted to share briefly before we sort of got into our agenda. I will say and Elizabeth can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think because of the board's strategic plan, our agenda is a little more condensed today. So I hope to even get us out, get us out early for sure, and maybe even around lunchtime. So to give you all some of your day back, not because we don't have lots to do, but because there's not a lot we can say about some things. So anything else, Elizabeth, that I have forgotten, as this is my first time sitting in for Ryan?
No, I would just add that in terms of in-person sub-entity meetings, I believe there will be a proposal going to the board about that in March. And my understanding is that sub-entity leadership, so our chair, Ryan, and our vice chair, Judge Rossi, will be able to provide feedback on that.
Yeah, and I didn't know if you wanted me, I did get an email about that, but I wasn't sure if I should talk about that now or maybe later. So we can talk about it later. I'll put it in new business. How's that? Okay. We need to approve the meeting summary from when we met in December. Hopefully everyone got a copy or saw a copy in the meeting notice. If you didn't, there's a link to it. Does anybody have anything, any comments on the meeting summary and action items in there? Not seeing anybody's hands. Would somebody like to make a motion to go ahead and adopt the meeting summary?
So moved.
I think that was Sal. And somebody like to second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Heather. All right, Elizabeth, I think we need to vote, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll do a roll call vote. Harrison? Rossi?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Rhodes?
Yes.
Richards? Salceda?
Yes.
Santoro?
Yes.
Torres?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we can jump right into the State Bar reports. And Elizabeth, I think you're going to give us an update on the Office of Access and Inclusion activities, right?
Yes. So I just wanted to let you know that the Office of Access and Inclusion is continuing to recruit for several positions: senior program analyst, and a program coordinator. If you have any candidates, please feel free to share out, through the State Bar website, that information to your networks. I also wanted to welcome, we had Heidi Slater. She's a new senior financial analyst who joined us in January, and she's helping us today take notes. Just wanted to acknowledge that she's here with us today. And her role is mainly on fiscal compliance for our grantees, as well as bank compliance on IELTS accounts. And so she interacts much less with COAF, but she is part of the Access and Inclusion team. And then there are other State Bar updates that we will cover as we go along through the agenda that I can chime in on.
Great. And so I think next on our agenda, and I see George on screen, we're going to get an update on the efforts to reform the attorney discipline process, which I know COAF is very interested in. George, thank you for being here. And you are open.
Thanks. Sorry, it always takes a moment to find the unmute button, even after 2 years. So thanks for having me. Elizabeth asked me to pop in. I'm sure that Sarah could probably provide as good an update, since she's been participating in the meetings of the Ad Hoc Commission. She's probably participated in more than me. The Ad Hoc Commission on the disciplinary system is still meeting. They had a meeting approximately, Sarah, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, to basically get reports from many of the work groups that had been put together to address particular issues. The two work groups that were the furthest along appeared to be the work group on early neutral evaluation committees and on progressive discipline. They are still out, and I assume should be coming back with their final recommendations to the commission at its next meeting. But the Early Neutral Evaluation Commission has been considering recommendations regarding early neutral evaluation meetings, conferences in criminal cases, which they currently don't occur, in referrals based on criminal convictions. And so that's one thing they're considering, and they're also considering what the approach should be to multiple early neutral evaluation conferences in disciplinary proceedings. In terms of progressive discipline, that work group is considering modifications to the standards regarding progressive discipline to consider granting the court more discretion, so that it will have more discretion in determining when progressive discipline may or may not be appropriate. They haven't come up with a final recommendation yet, but I expect that that should be forthcoming to the commission soon. The other work groups, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the other work groups seem to still be working on and considering what they were going to do in terms of their recommendations to the commission. And so I think that's kind of where everything is in terms of that commission and what recommendations they may end up making to the board.
Okay, I don't know if other people have questions, but I'm wondering, George, do you know if there's still work being done on the, I think we talked last time about a pilot program for defense counsel that we were working on. Do you know if that's still something that is in the works?
So I think that is still something that's in the works, and I think Leah probably knows more about that than I do.
Yeah, our plan is to present some options to the ad hoc commission at its upcoming meeting for an appointed funding for an appointed defense panel. The challenge is one, I think there's going to be a political challenge for the bar. As you know, we are getting hit on multiple fronts with the idea that we aren't aggressive enough on attorney discipline. And so it'll be, I think, sort of a cognitive challenge disconnect for some to see us using general fund money to support defense counsel costs, although I strongly believe that it's really important for the fairness of our system. But that's going to be a challenge. And then just the amount of the funding. I'm recommending that we start with $250,000. It's a decent amount of money, but it's not so much that I think it sort of also creates its own problems that, you know, if the amount is too large, but that doesn't buy you that much defense counsel. So that's kind of, those are some of the challenges, but we will be discussing that at the next ad hoc commission meeting.
Okay, great. And then I know Ryan is not here, and I feel like he would, but in his stead, I feel like I should at least ask about Rule 8.4.1, which was, I know is something that's near and dear to his heart, about whether attorneys are being disciplined for violating that rule. Do we know if there's any? I think that we had asked, Elizabeth, if I'm wrong, please let me know, but I think we had asked for at least some statistics on if anybody had been, if those charges had been raised against anybody, and if those had ever gone up to the state bar court.
Yeah, at our last meeting, I think we did provide some of those statistics, and since that rule came into effect, I don't believe it had been, but there were several cases still in process, is what I understood. But George, do you have additional?
Right. So
Yeah.
I think these statistics were provided to you, but from looking at it, it looks like we have a total of 29, at least according to the most recent statistics I got, it looks like we have a total of 29 open investigations relating to Rule 8.4.1.
Okay. And then there's an announcement going out, right, Elizabeth, to attorneys on that?
So one of the great things that came out of the last COAF meeting was to spotlight that rule. And I think kind of it's kind of spurred the state bar looking at other rules that we can spotlight, but 8.4.1 will be the first one. And so there is a video that was developed, and Ryan provided feedback on the script for it. So there is a video, and then there should be social media and, around it, as well as for the next all licensee email, which I believe will be coming out later this month. There will be a spotlight on 8.4.1.
Great. Does anybody else have questions for George or Leah? And I know, Sarah, we're going to ask you to, I think you're later on in the agenda to talk about this again.
Well, actually, if Sarah wanted to share now, I think it'd be fine. Yeah.
You want to do that now, Sarah?
Yeah, what do you want me to share? I'm
I don't
sorry.
know. You're on the agenda. It says you're going to share. maybe you can talk about the subcommittees that you're on and what is happening.
Yeah. So I guess I'm chair of the subcommittee on progressive discipline, which, still has quite a bit of work to do. I've also been very involved on the subcommittee that is addressing the issue of expungement, and have been really focused on expungement, both as a vehicle to remediate some of the harms that happened, disproportionately to African-American men being more disciplined than others. And, a lot of the findings from the Farkas and the Roberts reports. And there, where we're at is the subcommittee on that had divergent views. I'm actually writing up the proposal for one view, which is a much more liberal expungement period available for lawyers who have been disciplined. 1 year, 3 year, and then more extensive than that, and sort of a process for automatic expungements versus going to the state bar court and getting a discretionary expungement, somewhat similar to the criminal system that we have. And then someone else in the subcommittee who actually works for the Office of the Chief Trial Counsel is putting together the sort of dueling proposal that has much longer time periods for expungement, or no expungement at all for certain things. So that's been the thing that I've been kind of most involved in, although obviously going to kind of all of the meetings and have been on a bunch of different subcommittees, but that's the one that I personally am kind of putting a lot of energy into, and which I think dovetails very well with COAF's kind of role in state bar things and trying to remediate some of the wrongs and to be fair on a going forward basis. So those will be presented to the whole ad hoc commission, and then it'll be thumbs up or thumbs down. And hopefully some of the political pressures out there won't interfere too much with how that goes down.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for representing us on that commission. I know it's a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I know the rest of us do. Does anybody have questions for Sarah about the attorney discipline or the work that they're doing, or the expungement issue specifically, since it sounds like she's going to be drafting something on that? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Sarah, especially for jumping out of order. Okay, I think next up, Elizabeth, always correct me if I'm wrong, please. And I see Crystal is here. Great. An update on the law school retention study, which is goal for objective H.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen. I just have a couple of slides. Excited to provide this update to you all. All right. As a reminder, the COAF members in this working group are Novella, Shalak, Sal. And this is in support of the State Bar's strategic plan goal 4 objective H. Just a reminder of the law school retention study is, the goal of the study is to gather and analyze current data regarding law school retention. We're really looking at three main sections in the study. The first is looking at law school enrollment. We're looking at enrollment data by race and ethnicity and gender for all of the California law schools, and hoping to analyze this along with the survey findings to determine trends, uplift effective and promising programs, and potentially identify some best practices. The second piece of the study is looking at current recruitment and retention practices, and this was done via the Law School Retention Survey. This was an extensive survey that was administered in 2020 with topics including student recruitment efforts, academic support programs, non-academic support, key performance indicators, etc. And this was a wealth of knowledge as a data source, as we received an 87% response rate from the California law schools. The third piece of the law school retention study is taking a look at the available law school attrition data. Similarly, as the enrollment analysis, just trying to determine if there's any trends and any items to uplift or promising programs to identify as well. This has been a long project in the works, and I think the working group, as well as working group members who are no longer on COAF, have participated. And I just wanted to remind folks where we came from. I think I may have omitted the 2019 work actually began that far ago, but just in 2020, we administered and beta tested the survey to the law schools. We got input from the law schools before we administered the survey, just to ensure that we were asking relevant questions. November 2020 to February 2021, that's when we received the surveys. We began analysis of the enrollment and attrition data, presented those preliminary findings in September 2021. And during the break, we were very busy with some follow-up focus groups, really in response to those preliminary findings. The law schools really wanted to provide additional context that maybe wasn't captured in the available data. So we held 4 focus groups, topic specific on academic support, non-academic support, attrition, and additional considerations just to provide and get a full context and understanding. Currently, we're ramping up for the resource release date of spring 2022. The working group has met, I believe it was last week, and we previewed some preliminary calls to action, and we're still working to refine and develop those. So the full resource as well as the calls to actions will be presented at the next COAF meeting. Brief update, but if Novella and Sal want to chime in, feel free to do so.
No, I think you covered that pretty well. I think that the work is really good. It's exemplary. So you did a great job. Nothing to add.
Novella, did you want to jump? Anything to add? Okay. I just have a couple questions. Crystal and Sal and Novella, you please jump in also. So this was all California law schools, right? Not just ABA? ABA,
the CALS, the California accredited, as well as the unaccredited law schools, all participated in each of the different facets of the study.
Okay, great. And are we planning to do this again? To do the survey again? I know I'm asking you that before you roll the data out, but I'm just thinking, like, wouldn't it be great if we included other things in the next time we did it? So
I think once we publish the resource, there will be some things that we'll recommend that there may be an implementation period for some of the calls to action recommendations, and then we'll see at that point. I do think the ABA data that ABA California Law Schools report annually, so that data is always available, as well as the data from the CALS and registered law schools. So that, I think, smaller kind of data analysis we could probably do more easily on an annual basis. But with the law school survey and the focus groups, we may want to wait a few years to see if law schools have taken to the calls to action, have maybe tried to implement them and have made some progress before we go out and request additional information from them.
Okay. Anybody else have comments, questions about the law school retention study? Is it early, everyone? No one has. You're all just staring. See, this is why if we were in person, it would be better because.
No, I will dovetail on what Elizabeth mentioned, because I think that, law schools are buried with a lot of things, not just the curriculum and retention and attrition and all the good things like the bar exam. But yeah, I think once we see what the data shows us and what it's showing about where law schools are going and how they're trying to retain, maybe even do something a little more concentrated around one area, one specific area we want to see more growth in. And I think we need to be a little creative as a state bar committee to not just attack like the whole, but attack it in chunks and pieces. And, what are you doing about training students and attracting students and keeping them and educating them on technology or, other things like how do you train them to be practicing lawyers? I mean, there's a lot of ways we can do this. So I think that as we evolve, we can really turn this tool into a really good, not only a data gathering tool, but a tool that helps law schools really evolve in their mentality of their curriculum too.
Great, thanks, Sal. Anybody else? Anything you want to add to this? Okay, moving on. Update on the efforts to institutionalize diversity and inclusion goals in bar exam question development and grading. I know we've made a ton of progress on this, and Heather and Sal, I think this is your area of expertise. So, and I think one of you was charged with updating that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which one of us it is, but Sal, I'm happy to do it if you'd like.
Go ahead. Please go ahead, Heather. Yes.
Hi, everyone. So yes, our DIF committee met on January 12th and had the opportunity to review and approve the final versions of the guiding principles and examination development to minimize, someone put it on the screen for me, thank you, but potential bias in the bar exam questions. And so we just thought we would literally share this with you, and I'll read through it if that's okay with everyone. So examination developers should strive to make tests that are as fair and accessible as possible for all groups of test takers, despite differences in characteristics that include but are not limited to ethnic group, gender or gender identity expression, sexual orientation, regional background, native language, race, religion, age or generational differences, socioeconomic status, disability status, and veteran status. The goal of fairness in testing is to assure that test materials are as free as possible from bias and do not impose unnecessary barriers to the success of diverse groups of test takers. To test knowledge of the law and the ability to apply the law, test questions should be designed to ensure that the non-legal aspects of any question are broadly understandable by the population of test takers and do not contain information that will have the effect of disadvantaging one population of test takers vis-a-vis the others. To that end, the following guiding principles to enhance fairness, provide equity and accessibility, and minimize potential bias in the development of questions on the California bar examination should be followed. Can we scroll down, please? Thank you. Describe context and scenarios that are accessible or equally familiar to all and use terminology that has common meaning and understanding. Provide short explanations or definitions for acronyms and uncommon terms when use of a commonly understood term is not feasible. Ensure balanced representation of diverse and non-diverse groups in both positive and negative situations, in situations where individuals commit misconduct or are on the receiving end of misconduct, or where individuals are perpetrators and victims or witnesses. Ensure gender balance in the fact patterns and use gender neutral names where appropriate. Ensure balanced or neutral representation across gender, culture, ethnic groups, and disability status. Avoid using cultural references or idiomatic expressions that may not be equally familiar to all test takers, avoid construct irrelevant content, avoid content that unnecessarily angers, offends, upsets, or otherwise distracts test takers. In that regard, minimize the use of fact patterns that involve unnecessarily sensitive or emotionally charged topics. Avoid use of offensive language and stereotypes. Avoid language and questions that assumes all test takers have the same life experiences, social economic status, or family background. In considering fairness and bias, sets of test questions should be reviewed as a group for each exam and names and scenarios adjusted to ensure a balanced exam. All developers of the California bar examination should participate in or receive specialized training each year, which may include subjects such as implicit bias and stereotype threat, or any other subjects that are relevant to recognizing and addressing potential bias. The recruitment practices for all question developers should endeavor to create a pipeline of potential developers with varied perspectives so as to advance diversity and inclusivity, while also maintaining the necessary level of examination development and/or grading skills and expertise. Recommend that the Committee of Bar Examiners review all exam developer and grader recruitment processes and revisit term limits so as to advance diversity and inclusivity in the pool of question developers to include varied perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences, while also maintaining the necessary level of examination development and/or grading skills and expertise. Recommend that the Committee of Bar Examiners develop recruitment processes for exam question pretesters so as to advance diversity and inclusivity in the pool of pretesters to include varied perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences, while also maintaining the necessary level of pretesting skills and expertise. And just to remind everyone, this was the guiding principles came as a result of the committee reviewing a multitude of previous questions over the last 10 years to discern whether we felt that there were bias in the questions, intentionally or unintentionally, right? And after several rounds of review and several rounds of review of even the guiding principles, this was the final version that we agreed with. So are there any questions for either me or Sal or Shalak?
Can I just add that, so the DIF working group, they approved these guiding principles, and then the Committee of Bar Examiners approved the recommended guiding principles at their January meeting. And I believe these guiding principles will now go before the Board of Trustees for discussion and approval at their March meeting.
Leah's
If
got
no
her
one has
hand-
questions, I just want to make a comment.
And then Leah's got her hand up, so I'll let, after you.
Oh, please go ahead, Leah, please.
Well, I was just going to ask, is anyone from COAF participating in, or have you been reporting, Elizabeth, on the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission on the bar exam?
Yeah, they that report is coming up next.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at the agenda. Great, because I think a lot of this is very relevant to that conversation as well. Sorry.
That is next. Sal, did you want to?
Yes, thanks, Judge Rossi. You know, at the risk of sounding, you know, kind of, how do you say it? We have a term in Spanish I can't translate in English, but, you know, I think when we join this organization, when we join this committee, you know, we strive to do something that's really good for the state, to diversify not only the ranks of judges and lawyers, but to diversify it in a way where it's permanent. And when you think about it, when you remove the bias in gender discrimination and racial discrimination and all kinds of prejudices from a bar examination, you're starting right from the very seed of what gives birth to lawyers. And I couldn't be prouder to have worked with Shalak and Heather and the whole State Bar Committee on this, because of all the things we've done, of the many things we're going to do, this is one of those things that we should all embrace and be proud of, because we're really taking something that's been sitting on, you know, for years, When I heard stories of people taking bar exams that didn't know what certain words meant because they don't use it in their language, it's not part of their culture. And the first time they hear something is on a bar exam. And that's what might make the difference between them passing and not passing. When you can remove that obstacle, you are really opening up the freedoms that we all have and embrace every day. And I think, I don't want to go too long, so I'm going to sound too verbose, but I just want to say I'm really proud of work on this. And it really makes me happy that we did this, because this is really good stuff, really good things we did here.
I agree 100%, Sal. And thank you. No, Shalak isn't here, but Heather and Sal. Those guiding principles were comprehensive and they're going to make a real difference. And you're absolutely right, Sal. Michael, you have your hand up. Nice to see you, Michael.
Nice to see you too. I thank you for all the work that you've done on this. This is really fantastic. I just have a question, and it might be a premature question, but it's about when or if there will be a subsequent diff study to see what the effect is. I know that the last one looked at, I think you said 10 years. So I don't know if I'll defer to the statisticians on how long we need to wait to see what the effect is, but I'm just curious about that.
It's funny, I don't think we've discussed that, but when Sal was talking with the law school retention study about taking a portion of it and focusing on it, I was thinking this will be applicable at some point down the line, Michael, here too, right? After we, have applied those guiding principles and the last 3 bullet points in combination with things we recommended much earlier about unconscious bias training and really being selecting more from a more diverse pool of graders and pre-testers. So now we will have to kind of evaluate at some point, right? And then if we see that there's still some sticking points, maybe deep dive focus on a particular part of it. We were trying to address, to Sal's point, all types of elements as part of that committee. And I think it will be interesting. And I don't know what the right tension point is either, if it's 3 years or 5 years, maybe not 10, to start to see if we see some differences, hopefully positive, and quickly address any ones that aren't making the type of progress that we would like. So it was challenging. I think we said this in the last meeting. It doesn't jump off the page on the first read always, so that's, we were very diligent in looking a few times and then still trying to keep in the mindset of a test taker who is doing it in a very fast-paced, environment to ensure that we weren't missing anything. But I thought it would be so incredibly obvious. Like when we joined the committee, I was like, we're going to see all these things kind of glaring at us, but in some instances it was, and some it was a little bit more subtle. So
yeah, that was exactly it, right? That when you're taking the bar exam, you think you're going to get something very very straightforward, and it's not. And one of the things that struck me remarkably was not just some of the acronyms that we're used to using in the American colloquialism. We're full of acronyms that are not always pertinent to another community. In the Spanish-speaking community, there are certain acronyms that are used in the non-Spanish speaking community that don't translate. They just don't use them. And there's other situations where you have, the gender presentation of a woman always being the victim or the woman always being the scoundrel, and taking that out. I mean, just these subtle things, as Heather said, the subtleness of it was so remarkable. But unless you were really sitting down like we did and look at them with the benefit of that gentleman, the great doctor who helped us analyze this, you wouldn't see these things. And so, Michael, to your point, I think absolutely what we should do, perhaps as a state bar, maybe the state bar can take this up, is what is the snapshot of diverse groups that are taking the bar as of 2021, right? And what is the percentages of that? And then what is a snapshot in 2 years or 3 years? Like say, once the state bar says, let's do that, and we make sure these changes are implemented in the state bar questions, what's the snapshot of the students passing now? And then deep dive into those statistics and see, how many of those, maybe even survey those students, like an exit interview, how many of you, felt these things, the same things that Heather and I and Shalak were working on. How many of you saw those? And if they're saying we didn't see that, then we know our work has been for good.
That's actually exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
If we're not surveying test takers after they take it, right, to see if they felt if there were terms they didn't understand or.
No, I believe that there may be surveys of test takers just about the experience, like logistically, right? Because it's been online and that sort of thing, but I don't think we've been asking questions related to their experience with the substantive nature of the test. I mean, these are all great thoughts about how to kind of measure after these guiding principles are implemented. So I will definitely pass them along to my colleagues in the Office of Admissions for their consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're to Michael's point, if we're going to measure, and to Sal's point, then maybe we do just survey them afterwards and say, were there terms you didn't understand? Looking for all the great things you guys pointed out.
Because if you capture that information in the moment right afterwards, then you can pass that concern on to the graders before they start grading. So that's something they can then have in mind as they set kind of the score, right?
Yeah. Look, I'm adding things to our work plan, Elizabeth. Later on, she's going to be going, no, don't do that. Okay, anything else? Anybody else have comments on the incredible work that Sal and Heather and Shalak and the Office of Admissions and the bar examiner folks have been working on? Yes, I will echo Sarah in that because it was a huge undertaking and it is so necessary. And so thank you. And it dovetails nicely into the next thing, which Elizabeth has nicely pointed out, is for me to talk about, and that is in fact the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the California bar exam. So Ryan is not here and Donna's not here, and so Leah, I may lean on you just a little bit because I don't know the extent to which you've been going in subcommittee meetings, but for those who don't know, so there is this Blue Ribbon Commission. We've been meeting now for I don't know, 7-8 months. And one of the things that we did a few months ago was split up. And there is a subcommittee that is looking at the future of the bar exam from a bar exam, an actual testing bar exam perspective. Then there is, and that is the commission, subcommittee that Ryan is on. I am on the subcommittee that is looking at alternate paths to bar admission that don't include a bar exam. And I will say that I have learned a great deal about what other jurisdictions are doing as far as admitting folks to the bar in those states without a formal bar exam, the way that we all got admitted to the bar. And so at least in my subcommittee, we've been looking at things like the state of Oregon has a program where law students can do sort of a formal supervisory externship pathway where they work for a couple of years and have to hit certain milestones, do certain projects, and they work alongside the bar there and their supervisors, and actually working as attorneys before they get admitted to the bar. There are similar things that are done in Canada and then in other smaller states. So, and there are a handful of smaller states that don't have thousands of people trying to take the bar exam every year that are doing these paths. And really, our subcommittee is focusing on something that probably won't shock anybody here, and that is that law school doesn't exactly prepare you to be a lawyer. And that the things that you need to know in order to be a successful lawyer in your first, second, third year out are things that if you are lucky enough to do a clinic, you might have learned there, or if you externed, you might have learned it there. But really focusing on the types of things that that law students want to know when they leave, because one of the things that we know, having talked to law students, is that they want to be able to practice law when they leave, and that isn't something that the bar exam necessarily prepares you for, and it isn't something that law school prepares you for. And so we've been really looking at, is there a way to license attorneys that does a better job than a formal exam? The problems, of course, for that are the sheer number of people that try to get admitted to the bar in California every year. One of the ideas that's being floated around the subcommittee is, what if we do give everyone a supervisor and they work under a supervisor for a year or 2 years, and then they have to submit a portfolio of work to the state bar and get that approved. And of course, the problem with that for everybody is there's just not enough supervisors probably to go around. And then you also get into, the quality of supervisors and who's getting the best supervisors and who has access. And, if you come from a long line of attorneys, you might have access to supervisors that if you're a first generation law student, you won't have access to. And so there are a lot of things going around, but really I will say that there's a group that is passionate, and many of them are law school deans who are passionate about finding another pathway to licensure that doesn't involve a test that may or may not really ready you for the practice of law. So that is what's happening on our subcommittee. Ryan, of course, is on the other one, and we do not overlap. I don't know, Leah, if you've been involved, if you know what's going on there. I mean, I have a general sense of one of the mandates for that subcommittee was to talk about whether we as a state wanted to create our own bar exam that was separate from the uniform bar, which is being completely revised anyway, but whether we wanted a California specific bar exam that tested things that were important to California and not necessarily the UBE, whether we wanted performance exams instead of multiple choice, things like that. But I don't know, Leah, if you have more info on that than I do.
Yeah, at its last meeting, the exam pathway subcommittee did vote to develop a California specific exam, not go with the UBE. And I think that's what was triggered for me when we were having the conversation earlier about DIP, because obviously you have tremendous opportunity now. If the state does go ahead, if we do move forward with developing a California specific exam, to really rethink how we address these issues. And one of the things I wanted to ask you all to consider, perhaps recommending as part of that process, is some kind of implicit bias, cultural competency component to the exam itself, if we end up with an exam. I saw something in my newsfeed about ABA schools. I think the ABA has put forward a requirement that there be implicit bias training in law school as part of the accreditation. I don't know if that's ringing a bell with any of you that know more than I do. And I know some years ago that the MCAT exam expanded to include a cultural competency component. This is the medical admissions test to medical school. So I just think it would be interesting for us to consider how we might affirmatively try to test for some of these behaviors as part of our licensing exam. So that is the news out of the exam pathway.
Great. Yeah, and I can tell you a little bit about the ABA part, as I sit on an ABA commission. And so the Board of Governors did adopt a resolution that talks about adding cultural competency and implicit bias into ABA schools. Of course, there are exemptions to that. And there are exemptions to anything that you get past the ABA Board of Governors. But they are focusing on that. And, you know, one of the great things about having COAF represented on this, on both bar exam subcommittees, is that, you know, Ryan and I are both constantly talking about how whatever pathway we choose and whatever way we move forward, we need to do a better job at making whatever the pathway is more equitable to everyone involved. And I think that early on in the process, everyone on the subcommittee really felt like the uniform bar exam had some problems with appearing, with bias, both implicit and sometimes explicit. And so I am not surprised that the other subcommittee voted that way. And we are going to come back as a committee as a whole and talk about that. And I would not be surprised if what we end up with is sort of a mix of both, that there is, that there may be some sort of, portfolio component as well as a California specific exam. So thank you, Leah, because I did not know that. And that's great information to have. And I see, Stephanie, that you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Judge Kristen. Going back to your earlier report about alternative pathways, is there talk of maybe doing an option for students to pick either the traditional exam route or to do, a post-grad kind of internship? And then, I think that would help also future employers. First of all, that would make it more feasible, right? If the issue is having enough attorneys to supervise these students, and we have thousands of test takers. And then secondly, I feel like as an employer, that could be an added, point of reference. You can look and see, oh, look, this student, while didn't take the bar exam, did extern at XYZ place for the last year. So I don't know if that was on the table. And then my second thought was the talk of, the MCAT and whatnot. Maybe this is just totally crazy, but what about the idea of doing both? Meaning, like doctors, they have to take their exams, but then they also have to do their residency requirements, kind of having groups of students in certain, either government agencies or whatever. I mean, I don't even know how that would work, but just that would account for the concern of students not, I don't want to say not being prepared coming out of law school, but law school not necessarily giving hands-on experience.
Right. Those are both great questions. And yes, I can address both of them. So there has been talk specifically about having more than one path, an exam pathway and a practicum pathway, if you would. And in fact, we had the people from the whoever licenses the doctors, the U.S. medical, whoever they are, they actually came and spoke to us too and talked about that, about the residency requirement. And in fact, there is an oral part, or at least has been in the past, and they may be phasing it out, an oral part of the medical exam where you where there are patients who, and you have to you go in and you interview the patient, and you're scored about, how you do the interview, the recommendations, how you talk to that person, how sensitive you are to that. And so we actually have heard a little bit about that. There is also talk of, if there's an alternate pathway to the bar through a practicum approach, then it might be limited to public interest or public sector attorneys as a way of really limiting the number of people who would use it, because it's hard to know how many people would want to take an exam versus trying to do an alternate pathway. How long should that pathway be? How do we get the supervisors? How do we train the supervisors? How do we make sure everybody gets a good supervisor? One of the things that was raised by the non-ABA accredited law schools was, are our students going to have a harder time getting supervisors, and the quality of the supervision might be less for them because they're coming from a non-ABA school? There was also talk about, would there be a disadvantage or advantage to students who passed a traditional bar So the thought being that many, all of us, right, took the bar exam. And so we all know what that, for some of us, 3 painful days, for others, 2, what that experience is like, right? And this also happens, and the medical school folks talked about this too, that there's resistance to changing residency because it feels like a rite of passage that we had to do, so you had to do it too. And so there was discussion about whether students who opted for an alternate path to the bar might be disadvantaged by those of us who had taken the bar, because we would see that as less rigorous or less challenging than the path that we took. And is there some inherent bias in that? And of course, many of us said, no, we wouldn't do it. But then the med school folks said, look, here's our experience. Doctors don't want to change residency for the same reason. So, it's tricky. We certainly couldn't at the outset offer it to everyone if there was an alternate pathway. And I wish Donna were here, because Donna does a really good job of carefully saying in these subcommittee meetings, these are fantastic ideas, but also maybe think about how we would implement that as a bar. Because, if we have 2 different paths, then that's the state bar having to manage the 2 different paths. And, and here's the experience that we know from folks who didn't take the bar in the last year, and we're doing the supervision and having the supervised practice now. And here's our experience with that. So, there's a lot of really amazing ideas. And the great thing is we have, as Lee said, we have the ability to build it from the ground up. And so we're really trying to come up with what we think is the best. And so any ideas that you all have about that, and about the way you think it should be going, please share them. And I see people's hands up now. Stephanie, do you want to follow up real quick?
Yeah.
And then I'll go to Leah and Heather.
Yeah, really quick. Sorry. So just Kristen, you made it sound like the medical folks who presented, they're trying to move away from residency. Were there
So
issues?
they're not moving away from residency. They're moving away from. So it used to be part of the licensing for doctors required that they do this. The testing folks would hire actors to come in and pretend to have some ailment, and you would have to go in and meet the person and talk to them about their symptoms and then diagnose them. And the idea was that this was actually what it was like to be a doctor. And they are actually phasing out of that and moving away from it, even though, that's the way that the bars are sort of thinking about the way we should be going, right? And that is maybe what we should be doing is having people work for a year before we license them. And they're provisionally licensed for a year, and they do the supervised practice. And then at the end, they do a portfolio, and the supervisor has to write something, and they have to turn in writing samples, or, they have to talk about their experience in court or doing transactional law, whatever they're doing, that we should be moving toward that, whereas the medical folks are moving away from it.
Well, I think it makes sense to maybe can the idea of a fake kind of contrived scenario. I don't know that would really help our students either, but, I was just concerned. I didn't know if the medical board was saying, actual hands-on experience during residency wasn't proving to be helpful, which would be, interesting.
No. Yeah,
Okay.
no. They're saying residency is super helpful. And I think there were problems with the way in which the fake patients, not surprisingly, most of them are white. And so, there were problems with that, I think, that process. And so they are moving away from that, but keeping the residency piece for sure. Leah, and then Heather.
Yeah, I wanted to say one of the things that's been raised with us, it gets a little bit to your question, Stephanie, about choice. is the idea that the non-exam pathway would be open to people who, for example, made a commitment to go into legal services.
Mhm.
So you're sort of incentivizing certain pathways, but there are a lot of concerns that people have about that, like the idea that there'd be a perception that you have two different tiers, and but that's something that's certainly been discussed. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the LSFN, the Legal Services Funders Network, and that group has sort of this pathway program that they believe could be expanded to provide a non-exam pathway in the state. And so one idea would be that if that program was expanded, it is very much geared towards getting people placed in legal services organizations. So I don't know what you all think about that, but that is something that came to mind when you raised the question, Stephanie.
Yeah, there's definitely talk about opening it up to public sector, public interest attorneys, and you would make that commitment.
Judge Kristen Novella also has her hand raised.
Oh, great. I'm sorry. It blends in with the trees in the background of your thing. Was it up before Heather's? I'm sorry.
Yes,
was? Okay. I'm sorry, Novella. My apologies.
No
Your
worries.
background is so beautiful. I'm distracted by it.
No worries.
But please, go ahead. Thank you.
The piece about making like the training and learning process before practicing law more practical reminded me of Northeastern University. I remember my second year of law school, that was like the first time we were even allowed to do clinics and stuff like that. And I was in a clinical placement with a Northeastern law student. And she was explaining how like their program has more experiential learning, and they start off with having different placements and really emphasize learning from practicing lawyers. And I wonder if now that Northeastern University and Mills College are merging, if that makes it easier for like attorneys in California and the state bar to like understand how that program is operating and like take lessons from that.
I remember that too when I was looking at law schools, actually. That's a good point. And we didn't, I don't think that the subcommittee thought about reaching out to Northeastern, but what I will say is that we have had folks from, especially the ABA accredited and registered, the non-ABA schools here in California have talked about the work that they do with their students about bringing in practicing attorneys and really adding that practical piece in to their education all the way through. And Leah can probably attest to this as well. In the non-bar exam subcommittee, there is a lot of talk about how law school itself would need to be changed dramatically if we used a non-bar exam pathway, because we would be asking law schools, and I'm guessing even if we did our own California bar exam, but we're asking a lot of law schools in this process, and we're asking them, and in some instances, the law schools are saying, this is the way we want to go, and in other instances, the law schools are saying the ABA requires us to do the following, and we have to have a certain number of units in this, and we have to do this. But I know Hastings, for example, has a new program that Professor Spencer was talking about recently, where they have students do a year or two of public interest work, and after and pay them more and things like that to try and get them practical experience before the bar and then during the bar exam. But yeah, I think that's actually an interesting piece, Novella. I hadn't thought of that, but I will mention that to Justice Guerrero. I think that's an interesting idea. But we are asking a lot of law schools in this process, which is why probably there's several law school reps on the committee. Heather, and then Michael.
So I have 3 things.
Uh-oh, I'm gonna write them down, Heather.
First of all, thank you so much. This is such amazing work, and just kudos for driving it. You and Ryan, so grateful for that. I want to start with where Novella was. I too think the value of the clinics is really important. We had them at UCLA Law, and I feel like I did some of them because I took a fair housing clinic class, but also I feel like it was a requirement through the Black Law Students Association, just as a community service component of it. So we partnered with Bedzedic and Public Counsel to do clinics on Sundays at a church supervised by attorneys, but to have real world experience while helping the community on issues that were important to them. And whether you do mock versions of that, like the medical profession is doing, or real life versions, I think it's really important, not only for the practical elements for people who want to practice, but for the bias elements for people who have a different idea and concept of what being a lawyer is supposed to be in your service to the community. So I say that as a person who I will never forget, I'm 25 years out this year from law school, but in con law, a student saying to us, I don't need any of the Black students in this class because your contributions do not help me pass the bar exam. And I am just here to learn what I need to learn for the bar exam. And so having diverse voices in the room does not help me with that. And I think having a way to instill in law students that it is so much more than what, or maybe it's necessary for the bar exam because now this is part of the exam, whether it's a practical or a paper version, right?
Yep.
That like how shocking and short-sighted and narrow-minded it is to think that all I need to do, because then you carry that into your profession. So I think the value of hands-on experience, again, interacting with different types, and I can see that maybe if the mock patients were all white and they weren't diverse, you're not getting the experience that I'm talking about, but having some version of that real or, acting, I think is really important. So I just wanted to emphasize that. The second thing about offering the practicum version and limiting it to just public servants or public sector, I was curious what happens when those people, if some of those people decide to move into private sector, do they retest then if we have different levels of, because people have a lot of flexibility over the course of the years that they're practicing, and they may start in one place and then move over time. So that's just something to keep in mind if you take that kind of bifurcated path. And then the third part about what you said regarding implicit bias, if people take the practicum path and then feeling like people are going to think lesser of because they didn't go the rite of passage. Even if we all, as people who did go through that, say we won't have that bias, we had talked before about the young lawyers themselves having imposter syndrome and feeling like even if no one says a word, are people going to think that I didn't go through the same rigor that they went through? So just food for thought. I don't know how we address that, but I think we should be sensitive to it. So
yeah, I agree.
Thank you for letting me get all of that out.
You are very welcome. Thank you. Michael, and then Stephanie.
This relates to something that Heather said about moving between, I think, public sector and private sector, but more generally how all sectors would react to a non-exam pathway. There's sort of a non-exam, well, it's not a non-exam pathway, but for post-bar folks who go to DA's offices, and I think the AG's office has in some places a graduate law clerk or a graduate legal assistant program. And they get paid a lot less, right? And I'm a little worried that if we had some sort of non-exam pathway, it would be an excuse for private sector or public sector, wherever the people go to take a pay cut for a year or however long the program is. And that would create some real additional barriers to folks who are probably trying to go into the profession.
Yeah, and folks have talked about that as well. Especially with the, in conjunction with the talk that we've had about law school loans, which we'll also talk about later. Stephanie, I see your hand.
So what Heather, and I think Heather brought this up, this sort of reminds me of business school, where I feel like my peers who went straight out of college and took a job at Goldman Sachs, for example, they just bypass getting their MBA, right? Like, I think this is my understanding, at least, of getting a business degree, is that you can either go to Wharton's, get your MBA, and then go work at PwC, or you can skip the degree and get the hands-on experience. And then let's say 5 years out, because you have that experience at Pricewaterhouse or Deloitte or whatever, it's almost like it's the equivalent of getting the MBA, and that after a certain point, nobody really cares. But I don't know that for certain. I guess I feel like, I wonder if that could be a possibility, maybe not in the initial years, but eventually down the line. It's kind of analogous to, at some point, like, where you went to law school doesn't really matter so much. It's really more about your experience, right? Your grades in XYZ law school 10 years later are not as relevant because you've practiced in whatever area. So I guess my point is just that if there was this practicum alternative pathway, that maybe it might take time, but maybe it could eventually become the equivalent of somebody having taken the bar exam.
Yeah, and actually what you said, thank you, Stephanie, and what you said actually reminded me that, one of the other concerns is the portability of your law school education and the portability of not taking a bar exam. What happens if you try to leave California? If there's no bar exam, what happens if there's a practicum and a supervised post law school years, and then you get licensed? Is that going to be accepted outside of California? So I mean, as sort of, as Leah said, like, every time we come up with an idea, there's it's like this big shrub of different things, like, well, what about that? And what about that? Well, what about that? And it really is a massive undertaking. And it wasn't as simple even as I thought perhaps it would be, but I appreciate all of your comments, and I will make sure that I bring them all back and share them with Ryan as well, as we move forward and talk about next steps and what the committee is going to ultimately recommend to the Supreme Court. Okay, anybody else on the future of the California bar exam, which we all have thoughts on, right? Who doesn't have a thought about that? Okay. I think, let's see, Elizabeth, were you going to give us an update on the diversity report card in the 2020 impact survey?
Yes, thank you. So as we shared at our last meeting, the attorney's census data and the impact survey findings will be analyzed together in our next iteration of the diversity report card. We're really excited about that. We have an anticipated publication date for spring this year. And so we will be engaging the working group on that very shortly. So Sal, Sarah, Michael, and Heather will be reaching out to schedule working group meetings to share kind of our initial findings and get your feedback and reactions. And I also wanted to mention that along with the report card, we will also be launching our Leadership Seal program at the time. And so we'll also be reaching out to that working group, and there's a little bit of overlap. It's Heather, Ryan, and Michael. I think Heather and Michael, you'll have double duty, but I think it'll be really helpful since you'll know exactly what's in the report card and how it might impact the seal. So we'll also be reaching out to engage you on that in the next few weeks.
Awesome, thank you. And just when the seal, like, again, to Sal's point, it's so amazing to see an idea that we had here actually, come to life and to be put out there and to make a difference. And so again, that's one of the reasons why this committee is so incredible and so amazing. And so thank you to all of you who came up with that idea and are now going to help us put it into effect. I think, Elizabeth, is it also you again?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, do you want to keep talking now about
Yeah.
other things?
Yes, so our next item is the update on the implicit bias module. So I'm really super pleased to let you all know that the course was added for all attorneys starting February 8th, and it can be accessed through your My State Bar profile. It'll be featured on the attorney page on the State Bar website, and we're also engaging in social media about it. So this is just a screenshot of like what you'll see when you log into the e-learning module and click onto this specific training. Well, we plan to run reports periodically to determine, traffic and user engagement, passes rates for our post-assessment, and any feedback. And then, as you can see, the course is broken out into 4 different modules, and it's about an hour long. So it will be 1 hour of elimination of bias credit. And as you recall, COAF helped on the rules revision to increase the number of EOB credit from 1 to 2, with 1 being implicit bias. So this helps attorneys meet that requirement. And I also wanted to thank our working group on this. We had Novella provide a lot of really super helpful feedback on our transcript for this, as well as Judge Esther and many others in prior COAF members. And we also had a really great experience working with Catrice Monson and Right Size Media, and wanted to thank Heather for that introduction there. And then our e-learning platform developer, it was InfoPro Learning, and they've also designed several other State Bar courses. So really pleased to be able to let everybody know that this is launched. This has been kind of, I think, years in the making and really exciting. And I see Heather has her hand raised.
Yay! How can we share about it? You said there's some social media already. If there's shareable links that we can help.
Yeah. Let me. My understanding is our communications team was launching social media on this beginning this week. So let me get those links and I can send them out to COAF after the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I can move on to our next item, which is, update on addressing retention in the legal profession through law school loan repayment. And so, as many of you know, we have a working group of members from COAF, and that's Heather and Judge Kristen, members from the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission, and members from the Access to Justice Commission. We had 4 meetings in 2021 to understand law school loan debt and existing LRAP options. The State Bar put out a survey of public interest attorneys to gather additional information about loan repayment, loan forgiveness, and attorneys' experience with that. And so State Bar staff are currently working on a proposal for a statewide LRAP that we hope would be complementary to other LRAPs that would also fill gaps for public interest attorneys and address diversity in the profession. And so we will be sharing that proposal at the next working group meeting on March 8th. And then we will have a discussion of it at the next COAF meeting. So if there are any questions on that? Okay. And then the next update is on the early pipeline to the profession outreach materials development. And so we are hoping to begin work on our next video in the spring. So more to be reported, I think, at our next meeting.
Great. And so I know we're going to talk about additional diversity and inclusion initiatives and the work plan, but Judge Dulcich, I know you need to go at noon, and you've been so patient and hanging out with us. And if you would like, I'd like to take you out of order just so that I can make sure that we don't accidentally run over and lose you.
I appreciate it. And ironically, at noon is my meeting with the Judicial Council's advisory on providing access and fairness via Zoom, of course. So I do appreciate the opportunity. You guys are great. You're moving this right along. And Judge Rossi, know where you're coming from on Zoom. There's nothing like sitting across the table. I would have loved the opportunity to meet you all personally, and maybe I will have that opportunity. But just an update from the council. This year, the Judicial Council will continue to work on judicial diversity. As a follow-up to the 2021 Stronger Together Judicial Diversity Summit, our staff is working with the advisory committee to formulate recommendations. Once the recommendations are approved, the sponsoring agencies will implement the recommendations over the next 5 years. We're also updating our Pathways to Diversity website with new information on judicial demographics and items relevant to judicial diversity. The Judicial Council continues to work with the Judicial Nominees Evaluation, commonly known as the Jenny Commission, to evaluate training on judicial diversity, bias, and the effects on decision making. And most recently, a training was held in January of 2022, and the next training is scheduled for August of 2022. So that's my report, pretty short this time. Any questions that I can answer?
I know that the Judicial Council undertook the big diversity training session back in the summer, and I'm wondering if you all got feedback on that from the judges or lawyers who attended about that. I went to several of them and they were amazing.
Yeah.
And not just the one that I was on, but the other one, but they were great programs and really, I mean, groundbreaking, innovative stuff that other states hopefully will take.
Yeah, no, they truly were fantastic programs. I don't have that information. I can certainly find out and circle it back to you all.
Any questions at all for Judge Dolchitz? No? Great. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you, Judge
And you're
Dolchitz.
welcome. You're welcome to stay until noon if you'd like, or maybe.
I probably will. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for being flexible, going out of order. And speaking of being flexible and going out of order, Pat, I see that you are here, and I want to be mindful of your time too. So Pat Lee, if you would like to do your report now, we can take you out of order as well.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute. It didn't unmute. Thanks for taking this out of order. I have 3 things to report on. One is to remind everybody about the Pathway Summit. It starts tomorrow and goes to Saturday, 2 days. And as you look through the agenda, I know that you've been talking about focusing on lack of belonging on behalf of the students that the COAF is supporting. The whole first day is going to focus on the invisible barriers to student success, including imposter syndrome and lack of belonging. And it'll be a really great program, first talking about identifying those barriers, having breakouts for individuals to talk about experiences and questions and so forth, and then coming back with solutions on how to address and overcome the barriers. And so that's the main program for day 1. And then later in the afternoon is our awards ceremony and signing ceremony. Just a little bit on that. We are now focusing on not only increasing the high school law academies and the community colleges and ABA law schools and their undergraduate counterparts, but we're now expanding into the Cal State system. We are working really closely with the UC system, but now we're adding on Cal State entities and expanding that opportunity for those students as well. So we're pretty excited about that. Also, we're really excited. We just hired our new executive director. Her name is Pamela Enslin. And hopefully at some point, if you don't have it already, you'll receive her bio. She is a longtime practitioner with a law firm in Michigan and has a pretty extensive track record in terms of her successes, in terms of the kinds of cases she's handled, her community outreach and so forth. And she's really active in the ABA and has a lot of networking and contacts that we could take advantage of for the pipeline. So at some point, hopefully she will be the liaison from Cal Law to this entity, and you'll all get to meet her in person.
And Pat, I believe her bio and the other materials you forwarded regarding the Pathway Summit are attached to the meeting agenda as meeting materials.
Okay, great, Elizabeth. Thanks for doing that on such a short notice. I always forget about the having to convert them into all the information that's necessary for access. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is that the legislature, after hearing about California law and the pathway into the legal profession and so forth, provided for Cal Law for the next 3 years, a $5 million investment in our program. And it's designed to enable us to speed up the process in terms of the programmatic aspect and outreach and so forth, and especially creating the entire database, which we've been struggling with in terms of how do we link the data from all the different levels of the pipeline into one database, so we can show the success rate of the students traveling through the entire pipeline. So we're really thrilled about that. One of the outcomes, though, that they have imposed is that we prove that we're successful in terms of the transition, which does require that database being created. But we're really happy that we're finally able to address that database data collection aspect. And again, I wanted to shout out to you all and through COAF, Elizabeth and Leah through the CBAR, for the continued support that we receive every year to sponsor our Pathway Summit. The investment from the legislature doesn't cover certain programmatic aspects, including our summit, and we're going to add the High School Law Academy Summit. We used to do that for many years before Cal Law was created, and the 2+2+3, but we're going to circle back at this point in time and begin convening the High School Law Academy separately because they have different needs from the community colleges, undergrads, and law schools. And we'll continue doing the Law Day program, Constitution Day. We just did a critical race theory program, and any other issues that our partners raise for us, we will begin focusing and convening them all in terms of those specific issues. So thanks again for the support for the summit, and we hope that we can continue to partner with you all on that in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat, and congratulations on the additional funding. That's amazing.
I know, great, it's exciting.
And I know I speak on behalf of all of us in saying that if you're no longer our liaison, we will be missing you greatly. You are a fixture at every one of our meetings, and so it would be it's hard to imagine a COAF meeting without you. So I hope that you will still be here to provide reports.
I'll try to sit in. I'll work with Pam to see how we'll do that transition. But I am retired.
Sure you are. Sure,
yeah, I know. I have more work now than when I was working. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I hear from many retired people, actually. And so everyone should have gotten I think a reminder yesterday from Elizabeth on the Pathway conference. That is this weekend, right?
Right. And if you want to register, I think that information went out too. When it comes to the point where it asks what your category is, put that you're a Pathway partner, because then the registration is complimentary.
And I think I saw that Justice Jenkins is one of your keynote speakers as well. So.
And then John Burris is the speaker of the second day. So.
Yep. Okay, so folks who are interested, please try and join, because it is a great program. And thank you all for all the pipeline work that you do, that is very near and dear to the hearts of everyone here on COAF. So thank you, Pat. And of course, you are welcome to stay too. All right, I apologize, Elizabeth, because I sort of cut you off in the middle, but I know we want to talk about additional diversity and inclusion stuff and then the work plan. Do you want to do the work plan first? I know you have it.
Oh, sure. If you like. Yeah. So as everybody, well, as Kristen alluded earlier, the Board of Trustees is currently engaging in strategic planning, and they are being very thoughtful about that. And so they're not quite done yet. And so they typically COAF presents our work plan to the board in March for approval for the year. But because the board hasn't finished strategic planning yet, they don't want to approve work plans until they've done that, just to be sure that, you know, everything kind of fits into what the strategic plan will be. And so we anticipate that work plans would go to the board in May. And so one of the things that we need to consider is that, you know, we can continue all of our existing work because that's already been approved from last year, but any brand new work, we will have to pause until the board approves it. So I think we have plenty of work to do, as all of our updates illustrated. There's a lot of work that COAF can be doing between now and May when the work plan is approved by the board, but I just wanted to flag that for you. So any brand new items, we would pause until the point that the board approves it, likely in May. So with that information, I wanted to share with you, share my screen. We worked really hard, I think, at our December meeting on the work plan already. And then there were some questions. And so I just wanted to review it with you again. And then if you are all agreeable, then we can approve it and have it ready for when the board is ready to review it.
That sounds good.
So I apologize. I think I have too many screens open on my desktop. Okay, so this is the draft that we worked on last time. So I can walk you through. The other thing that I will be asking when you COAF votes to approve as in the motion, if you would delegate authority to staff to align whatever you all want in the work plan to whatever the new strategic plan is. Because my understanding is in the new strategic plan, goals and objectives will be much more high level than what they were in our last plan. Sarah, you have a question?
Oh, I was just wondering, could you make it bigger? Because otherwise
sure.
I'm going to be 5 inches from my screen.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Is this better?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, as big as possible works for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, so again, you know, this, you know, I'm totally guessing, but you know, I assume that the new strategic plan that the board approves won't be quite as specific as this. And so whatever activities that COAF wants in the work plan, you know, if you grant me the authority, then I would just kind of do the matching of the activities into the new work plan, into the new strat plan for the work plan when that's all approved. So just also wanted to put that out there so that you're aware. So I think in our last discussion about the work plan, everybody felt pretty comfortable with these items related to law school retention. We are working on this resource guide right now, as Crystal reported earlier, and we do anticipate that that will be complete in this first quarter of the year. You know, in terms of implementation, I think that's of any kind of, you know, calls to action or recommendations in the work plan. I think that is, you know, implicit in this language already, but I, you know, open it up if there are any suggestions to wordsmith it. Okay, I don't see any hands. And then also, I know that there was a question about like ongoing law school study. And so we do have in here reviewing the data. And so I think, as I mentioned earlier, like the data, I think it would be something that staff could routinely, you know, and probably annually be able to present to COAF for review. And then, you know, based on that, and maybe some other ideas related to what comes out of this study, the resource study, the resource that the study will be able to maybe, focus on things in the future. I did also want to add that, part of the what we've learned in the study is that schools don't collect the same types of metrics, and so it may be part of the implementation after the study's published is working members of COAF working with law schools to maybe develop metrics that everybody collects and that is reported to the state bar, and then we could share that out and analyze that.
Do we need to add, besides ABA schools, just the California accredited schools?
Yeah,
And not accredited?
that's right here.
Sorry,
Cal's
Frank.
administered. That's them.
My bad, sorry. Okay, I thought I was looking at the next one down.
Yeah. No problem.
The one that track law school attrition data, because, but you got it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, and I'm just changing that to ongoing. Okay, so if there's not additional comments, I can move on to the next set of activities. Oops. So these activities are all related to bar exam. This one is related to diff, which I think will be concluding shortly. So if there are, and then there's ongoing work with the Office of Admissions related to outreach for graders and pretesters, as well as ongoing implicit bias training for those associated with the bar exam.
Is this where we need to add some note about analysis in the future or revisiting to see impact?
We could add, to recommend to, sorry, let me turn on track changes. Ongoing study or review. Heather,
yeah. To review and revisit like the impact of all of this progress. I don't know if annual is too frequent, but on some sort of a regular cadence.
Yeah. Can we just say recommend an ongoing review and comparison of bar examinations starting with the year 2021?
But can we be more specific? Because it's like to gauge impact of the
guiding principles.
Yeah.
You go. That's it. That's it.
Okay, and I saw Michael, you had your hand raised.
I think y'all got it.
Okay. Okay. Any other additions or edits in this section? Okay. So this next section is related to the California Bar Exam Strategies and Stories program. As you recall, that's the program where there is an intervention for bar takers that's focusing on imposter syndrome and stereotype threat. We had the researchers come speak with us, I believe last August. And so I'm happy to let you all know that this program has been included in the Office of Admissions annual budget. And so it is institutionalized now to continue to provide this intervention moving forward. So right now we have in our work plan just to continue to monitor the study and review findings. And so I think, actually, I am not sure how long the study is going to be going on for, but we can definitely receive updates when there are updates about the study. And then there is developing a communication strategies for outreach to law students and bar applicants about this on the work plan. And is that something we would like to continue? I think currently when a law student registers for the bar exam, there is, as part of registration, the option to opt into the program, into this Strategies and Stories program. And then I've seen myself, and I've shared on my LinkedIn, there's a lot of social media around it too. So I don't know if there's additional things that COAF would like to talk about and develop around that.
We can leave it open, right, Elizabeth, and then come up with stuff if we come up with other ideas.
Sure.
On this.
Or maybe we want to just delete it and focus on the other things. You know, there's so much work. Sounds like it's kind of been accomplished.
We can do that too. And I mean, we will receive updates on it. COAF will receive updates on it, and if you wanted to add it back, that's also possible later.
And the communication strategy is ongoing, so okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts about taking it out, checking the box that said, yes, we did this, and patting ourselves on the back for doing it and the great work that we're doing, and thanking the Office of Admissions for implementing this. Or do you want to leave it on? I see both sides, and I'm happy to entertain comments on either side if folks have feelings. I totally hear what Sarah's saying about striking it out so that, our work plan doesn't look more onerous. Nobody else has thoughts.
I'm fine with striking it too,
Okay.
as completed.
All right.
I'd support taking it out as well.
Okay. Do we need a vote on that, Elizabeth?
No.
All right.
I think that as long as there's consensus, I think we can just strike it.
Okay.
Great.
Hearing no objection.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Okay, great. And then our next set of activities is actually a very broad set related to analyzing the available data, so data from our attorney census typically, to identify particular obstacles to diverse attorneys' entry into, retention, and advancement in the profession. So this, I think we often use this as our catch-all. And so I think actually one thing that's missing from our work plan is working on the leadership seal. And at least, yeah. So, but I do think this item captures what we're trying to do with the leadership seal. So if it's okay, we maybe can add language related to the leadership seal here.
Yeah, that looks like a good place for a semicolon and an IE.
Develop leadership seal.
Yeah.
And maybe we add to the beginning, identify and recognize diversity and inclusion programs.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And then, plan and participate in diversity summits. So I think for 2022, likely once we issue our diversity report card, we'll want to do sector-specific summits to bring folks together to discuss, to share out, and then discuss and get kind of conversations going on that. So that I think is going to be exciting to work on. This continue to provide feedback on the attorney discipline system. I think we're doing, and then this is the item on loan forgiveness and LRAP. The next bullet is related to, the option to have presentations at the COAF meeting on pipeline issues. And this support presentations to underrepresented high school, college, and university students on how to prepare for becoming a lawyer at programs convened by nonprofits and other appropriate entities. So I understand that probably a lot of you do this personally. I don't know if you all do it as COAF members. So I was wondering if we wanted to keep this.
Well, can I ask a question about that? Because I know when Heather and Sal and I rolled on to COAF, that there was a lot of discussion about what kind of pipeline work COAF was specifically permitted to do, or perhaps had removed from its plan. And so I have always been hesitant when I speak out to talk about it as a COAF person, but if there is a way, and if COAF is permitted to do this, and I think this is an area that this incredible group of people could really get together and make a difference. I mean, we could have COAF, going in to places and making a difference, because we're all doing it by ourselves already, right? I mean, Heather's already got mentees and she's speaking all over it. We're all doing it in our own ways. It would be nice if we could do it, if we could put some of that energy together, when we can actually be together again. But I wasn't sure about the parameters on that. So maybe Elizabeth, you can.
Sure. So
I see Michael's hands too.
So you're right, Kristen. At the time that you joined COAF, it was at the time where with our current strategic plan was just beginning, and the board had made a conscious decision at that time to focus the energies of the state bar in pipeline law school moving forward, recognizing that there are a lot of great groups like California Law, like local and affinity bar associations, law schools even, that are doing that earlier pipeline work. And the state bar also wanted to be sure that its efforts and resources were in a place where the state bar could make the most impact as a regulatory agency. So my understanding is that with the new strategic planning process, that law school moving forward will still be where the state bar's work in pipeline is. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does not.
So, I mean, I guess if you were to make
well, support is such a broad word.
Right.
I think we should leave it on, because I think, to Judge Kristen's point, we're all available for Cal Law or any other organization that would like us to participate and support them in some way to help pipeline in their efforts, even if they're concentrated. So even if the state bar isn't the leader in for this particular demographic, we're all, and I'm volunteering everyone, all available to support in any way that they need. And so if you just keep support there, I think it is ongoing. We're
right. No, and I mean, I think I was just suggesting we could delete it only because you all are already doing this personally, and I don't think COAF does it, or but I'm happy to leave it and leave this general item on.
Well, let's hear, Michael, you have thoughts.
I may be thinking of a different meeting. I know we're all in a lot of different groups, so this probably came up in a different meeting. But was there a discussion at some point about achieving this by having a spot on the website, either the State Bar's website or COAF specifically, to say, essentially, if you want somebody to come and talk at an event that has to do with building the pipeline at the law school level or otherwise, you can contact us and we'll sort of refer you out to somebody. Maybe I'm thinking of something different, but that would seem maybe a little bit more proactive than generally saying, support presentations, which I agree we all do in various ways.
I don't think that there's any, I don't remember that.
I don't.
It's a great idea,
It must have been something else.
I don't recall that, and I actually don't think like State Bar staff would be equipped to make those kinds of referrals.
Okay, then I'm thinking of something else, and that sounds fine to keep it as general as it is then.
Okay, great. So then moving on, so California Lawyer Association, they hold an annual one-day pipeline summit. And so this item is to discuss partnering with them on the next one. And then the next bullet is related to outreach, development of outreach materials and the videos. The next one is the Be a Lawyer, Make a Difference brochure. So that, I think that's still a great resource. And so hopefully we're still distributing it and publicizing it. And then this is a brand new item. And so this would be an item, an example of an item that we would need to pause until the board approves the work plan. And this is related to developing a resource page on imposter syndrome and its impact on DEI in the profession. Okay. Oh, Sarah, I see your hand.
I know we had a huge discussion about this at the last meeting, and I hate to revisit it, but I wonder if really the COAF or the State Bar website is really the place to put a link to these resources. As Pat was just talking about, this is an important part of the programming that the CLA is doing tomorrow. I just don't think people are really going to think to go to the State Bar to read about imposter syndrome and other things. So I know we talked about it and landed here, but I just thought I would just kind of make that point. It just feels like a waste of our resources to kind of do this, and that other organizations do this better and are already doing it.
Thanks, Sarah. I hear you on that, and I know Ryan's not here to talk about it. And obviously this is something that was important to him, is important to him. And it may be that the Board of Trustees says the same thing about it.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah, and I mean, unless we, market the heck out of it on social media, where it becomes sort of ingrained in people's mind that it's a link, and it, create a, like say the Be the Lawyer, Make a Difference is a nice link. If we can, put that on some sort of a website where it goes through the State Bar, but it's a special link that you click on through a social media outlet that just kind of goes to it immediately without having to go to the State Bar and look for it. That would be one way to work it if the State Bar is concerned with metrics, what have you. But yeah, and just one quick mention too, this whole notion of the Be a Lawyer, Make a Difference brochure, I saw that as an opportunity to join that with the efforts above that when you were showing that, Elizabeth, in terms of having COAF members have that as part of their mandate to do regular outreach to the communities that we're serving, to use that as the tool. Maybe one of the tools we use is doing that. So I think that's an important, if we're going to really make a difference, as the brochure says, I think we need to take the paper and take it to the people and give it to them and be in front of them. And, it's nice we could say we want to do that, but, maybe create a subcommittee right now, or, at some point in the working group plan, we're going to create a subcommittee to develop ways to empower ourselves as COAF members to lead the charge, and then go out and start training lawyers, maybe make a module, create a module where we have a training, what I think I'd call like training in a box. So that if a law firm or a law department says, how do I get my lawyers to go out there and train in the community? Say, look, here's the training in the box that we develop at COAF. It's got all the materials, it's got all the how-tos, it's got the PowerPoints, it's got the everything from A to Z, from how to organize it at a community center, who to call, et cetera. Everything's in there. All you got to do is flip it open and just put it forth. I think if we did that, not that we have to go out there and canvass the whole state of California and do it, but if we created something that could be useful, I think that would be a great tool for us to empower the lawyers of the state with.
So Sal, that sounds like a new thing you want to add to our work plan?
Yeah, suggestion. Yeah, just make it part of the, to extend the work plan a little bit further in that vein.
Can we fit that somewhere already, Elizabeth, or is that something that we need to add as a new? item to look at? I actually, I mean, I see Sarah, your hand is up too, but you know, the National LGBT Bar and does this too already. We have a program, we call it Train the Trainer, where we create a training. And then we expect people to take it out and train other people or train themselves and then train other people. So I know that kind of training in a box, like you're talking about, Sal, exists. And, you know,
it sounds very janky. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better term, but it's not meant to
we
be.
call
It's
it
really
Train the
meant,
Trainer, so.
just the whole idea. But you know, I think the thing that because I tried that in a different group I was in, Train the Trainer, it was like, oh, you know, Train the Trainer. So it means so many things, but if we could just capsulate it into something where it's easy as you just following, like a how-to, you know, maybe a how-to guide, you know, whatever you want to call it. But the whole idea here is for COAF to be the leaders in developing a way to train and educate, really more of an education for the communities that otherwise wouldn't think about law as a path to career. How do we edify those communities, those kids that are in high school wondering, what am I doing the rest of my life? Have them put that on their list of things that they, you know, possibly want to do with their life. That's really what the whole idea is.
Okay.
So my sense is that this type of activity is more associational in nature, which are activities that the State Bar has moved away from. There are, as you know, as Kristen mentioned, the LGBT Bar has their own Train the Trainer kind of toolkit, and so there are other entities doing that work. And I can add this to the work plan, but I don't know if the board would approve it because it's not, you know, really in kind of the purview of what the board wants. Our resources and time to be in.
Okay. Well, we could also, didn't we say, isn't there something in our work plan about partnering with Cal Law? I mean, maybe that's something that we can, you know, work with Pat's group on, and we can put it in there somewhere.
I mean, I think you can personally work with Pat on the pipeline issues. I don't know if it's an official COAF activity.
Okay. I see, Sarah, did you want to talk about the imposter thing again? Yeah. Okay. You're still muted.
Yeah, sorry. I know I'm flagging this, but
no,
it also makes me really uncomfortable to single out, you know, DEI has so many different facets, right? Imposter syndrome is one. And it just makes you really uncomfortable to sort of just shine a spotlight on that one thing. And for example, not talk about implicit bias, not talk about, you know, other becoming an anti-racist, you know, all kinds of other things that are factored into it. And I just wonder, you know, if we start this, is it a slippery slope? Do we then need to do everything else? You know, is that really the best use of the State Bar resources when other organizations do that and do that so well? So, you know, for me, it's just who does it best, and the uncomfortability with just singling out one little facet and saying, and sort of putting a spotlight on it and saying, this is the most important thing is, you know, BIPOC, people who self-identify as BIPOC, you know, having an imposter syndrome, when I don't think that's necessarily true, and sort of also connotes, I think, a negative message as well. Anyway, I'm sorry. I know I'm flogging it, but I really just think it should come out.
Okay. So Elizabeth, I don't know, you know, sort of how to handle this, except that maybe, you know, one thing I'm thinking about is maybe changing what we have here to say develop a resource page, or on the State Bar website, or link to other groups, you know, or other. I'm trying to give us flexibility here because I know Ryan's not here to to advocate this, and I know that he feels strongly about it, and I don't want to make unilateral changes on this without giving him, but.
Sure. I have an idea, but I see Novella also has her hand up.
Okay, thank you, Novella. Yeah, go ahead, Novella. Thanks.
I guess I sort of get the point that like there are other people who are experts on this, and so it's not like we already have the expertise on imposter syndrome. But then I also have like the context of having worked on the module, the implicit bias, all of the different types of bias module. That was something that required like tapping into expertise of people who like know those topics better than a lawyer would. And so part of me wishes that like something about imposter syndrome had been in like those types of resources had been part of that. But I also see like that module was like a step one, and that later there could be a step two. And so because I don't know personally that much about imposter syndrome and am just going off of like what it sounds like it is, and like the experiences that Ryan was sharing about his mentees, like I do see that there is like a potential in the legal profession for people to stereotype people from communities of color and treat them as imposters. And I don't know like how much of imposter syndrome is about that external dynamic and how much of it is about the internal dynamic of like, what am I experiencing as a person of color, or if it's both. And so I wonder, like, I sort of feel like I don't know enough about like what it is to say that like it should or shouldn't be something that the state bar is teaching people about.
So just because Novella, you're kind of along the same lines of what my idea was. One option is later on in our in the work plan, there is exploring additional MCLE elimination of bias modules like anti-racism. So maybe it's that putting, exploring a module on developing a module on imposter syndrome. That could be an option. So I don't know. And I mean, for this, maybe it's a little bit more broad, explore options to spotlight imposter syndrome and its impact, and develop, including possibly developing.
Yeah. I think that gives us more flexibility and perhaps a better chance of the, Board of Trustees approving this item. Anybody else have thoughts? Pat has her hand up.
Yeah, I know for the last couple of meetings, we discussed the possibility of introducing the potential aspirational policy for DEI activities similar to the pro bono policy.
Yes.
And if you do that, the way it's being implemented with the ABA is to also include a wide range of the types of activities and areas of focus that could qualify for a quote unquote DEI activity. And this could be included in that as one of the areas of activities that individuals could be involved in to qualify for that aspirational goal. I mean, it's just another way of putting things on the list that attorneys could be engaged in to meet that 50 hours per year. Is that policy on this proposed task? I didn't see it.
Not explicitly in this. We had talked about it being part of like the leadership seal program. There's a pathway for illegal employers, and then perhaps there's also a pathway for attorneys.
Okay. Thanks, Pat.
Okay.
Sarah, you have your hand up?
I would delete the second sentence of that bullet because I think
this one,
potential partnership with experts. Also, I know Ryan went to UC Davis Law School, but I feel uncomfortable singling that out. So I think that's sort of subsumed within explore. So anyway,
okay.
That would be a
He actually
suggestion.
went to Hastings, so I don't know if Davis has a specific
I
program.
think that
around-
there's somebody I think there's a professor at Davis. And Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought in some of the emails that Ryan had sent about this, that there was somebody at UC Davis who studies this, and there aren't very many folks studying this specifically, but there is somebody at Davis that talks about it.
He went to Davis undergrad.
There you go. There you go. How do you guys remember where everyone went to school? I mean, that's impressed. I'm just impressed.
So, do we want to delete this, understanding that explore could also include this?
Yes, I think again that it's more likely. I think the specificity might also make it harder at the Board of Trustee level.
Okay. And then I think we should push this out till year end, just because it is a new item that we're not going to be able to work on until the board approves the board plan.
Right.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I need to.
You're making it smaller.
I'm so, no, I'm just trying to
Sarah's
center
gonna,
it.
Sarah's
Okay.
gonna ask for it to be bigger again.
Okay, so this item is related to the elimination of bias, MCLE. So I think, you know, with the new board, with the new strategic plan that the board is working on, I'm pretty sure this will be much more broad. Right now we have consider additional EOB subtopics. So we could add imposter syndrome here as like in the list of possible topics, if people would like.
Sure.
We can change the spelling of evaluation also.
Oh. Sometimes it's hard to type in front of a live audience.
Always hard to type.
For sure.
Always.
Okay.
I don't know, do we want a comma there? No, I'm just kidding. Are you looking for more subtopics, Elizabeth?
No, because we will only be able to do one. I think Novella can attest that just doing the implicit bias one is a very, very heavy lift. It does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I think starting with these as to consider is a good start. I mean, there can be additional ones later on. I don't want to overwhelm our work plan. Okay. This next set of activities is related to the report card. So actually, we've done this, review the first annual diversity report card, calls to action. And well, yeah, we're doing this. The sector specific calls to action will be in the report card that's published this spring. And we had various working groups participate in that. So I think this is right to, and then review findings from the impact survey, which we're doing. Continue to review attorney census data. And then for this one, review data on violations of Rule 8.4.1. I do have a suggestion. And for me to make my suggestion, I need to zoom out a little bit to look at my note on it. So pardon me for just a second. So I'm proposing that we add additional language to be more specific, not just reviewing the data. But yeah, like maybe make a recommendation about potential interventions or actions to the Board of Trustees based on the data. So that there's a little bit more to this, sorry, to this activity. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I just have a question. It seems like I'm not sure that it's really related to the report card or impact survey as much as it is related to attorney discipline, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there's a different objective that it might fit under.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So we should probably then move this to I think this our kind of catch-all category where it's just based on data, identify obstacles. I think it fits here. So if you're agreeable, I can move this item there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for pointing that out. So there are thoughts on adding to this activity instead of to have an action after review?
No, I think that's broad enough that it gives us flexibility.
So yeah, yes, okay to add it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then moving along, related to the report card, is there anything that anyone would like to add to this list? Okay. And then I think this is our last item. It's related to supporting judicial diversity efforts. As you know, the Judicial Council is leading these efforts, and so COAF and the State Bar, we play a supportive role when requested. And I think in December, we added this language.
Yeah, that's why I asked Judge Dolchich if she had
Right.
any feedback from the Judicial Diversity Summit, just so that.
Right. So, so then I think that brings us to the end.
There is just a typo there, Elizabeth, on the word
Sure.
diversity. So.
In this.
Oh, right there, judicial diversity. Wow, it doesn't catch it either.
Where is it?
Right there, 2021 judicial diversity.
Oh, maybe because the D is capitalized.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other items that you want to return to? Anything else we would like to add?
Nobody has anything they would like to add? More things for us to work on? No. I don't see anything.
Okay. Then if I'm just checking to because I had some notes that about additional language, but I think we captured all of it.
Okay.
Okay, so
so I need to make a motion, right? To a
yes,
okay.
And let me
thank you for writing it out for me so that I don't have. Okay.
And if you there is wordsmithing, I'm happy to type into it so that everybody can see what the motion is.
Okay. Does anybody have any ways in which they would like to change the proposed motion before I read it and ask for?
Today's the 17th.
Oh, I think I wrote it on the 16th. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Super
That is
awesome suggestion. Okay. Can I move it and then get a second? That's okay, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
I think so.
All right. Anybody else have any other changes before I read it in? Seeing no hands. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the 2022 COAF work plan as discussed and edited at the February 17th, 2022 COAF meeting. To delegate authority to staff to align the approved work plan to the State Bar strategic plan when the board's current strategic planning process is complete, and to present the COAF work plan to the board for approval. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second.
Okay,
I
so I
don't know.
have
Okay.
Kristen moved and Heather seconded.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'll do the roll call.
Thank you.
Harrison? Rosie?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Coleman?
Yes.
Good?
Yes.
Rhodes?
Yes.
Richards? Salceda? Santoro?
Yes.
Torres?
Yes.
Okay, and the motion carries.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work on that also, and for typing in front of everyone. So I see that we don't have anybody here from California Lawyers, right? And
That's correct.
okay. So there's only one more thing before I let you all go. There's one more thing that I want to talk about, and I alluded to it in the beginning, and I see that Leah is back. And so my apologies, Leah, if this isn't something that I should ask for feedback on, but I wanted to let you all know that Ryan and I did get an email from the State Bar that talks about the future of sub-entity meetings. And before Ryan and I get together and write a response, I wanted to let you know what the proposal was and get your feedback, because I think that we are better when we speak together and everybody's voice is included. So I will, summary, and Leah is here, so she can always jump in. The proposal to the sub-entities is that in the future, we will limit the number of in-person meetings to 2 in-person meetings a year. The other meetings would be held by Zoom. For those of you who joined during a pandemic, it used to be that we met 4 times a year, and all 4 times were in person. Now, some of the time, half of us were in San Francisco and half of us were in LA, but then at least once or twice a year, we were all together in the same location. And so
Once a year.
Once a year. So that meant that some people flew and came up for the meeting, or we went down to LA once a year. So the proposal is that the in-person would be twice a year, and then the other 2 times that, and for COAF, because we only meet 4 times a year, the other 2 would be via Zoom. The thing I also want to say about this, and Leah, please again jump in if I'm not getting it right, because it was a really long email and I was trying to, but the State Bar plans to sell or put up for sale the building in San Francisco that they own. And I don't know what the future of additional State Bar space is. I imagine it's renting space. But if you never went to the State Bar building on Howard, there was a room that was big enough to have us all in there together at one time, had video conferencing capabilities, things like that. It is possible that the new space that the State Bar has may not be ready for a while, and may not necessarily even be big enough to have us all in there. And so at least for the short term or near future, any in-person meetings that COAF would likely take place in Los Angeles, because that space is free and not up for sale. So I want to put that out there, because Ryan and I want your feedback on how you feel about that, just so that we can pass it on because we've been asked to pass our thoughts on to the Board of Trustees about this proposal to limit in-person meetings. Obviously for us, we only meet 4 times a year. I'm sure other sub-entities meet more than we do. So they may feel differently, but does anybody have thoughts on, I sort of said my thoughts on it, right? I miss you all. And as much as I love seeing you in tiny little Brady Bunch squares on my screen, I do miss having you all there and sharing food and conversation with you. But Ryan and I understand that we are just 2 people. So Sarah, I see your hand. Thoughts? And I will.
Well, first I was going to say, if we want to do it in San Francisco, we can do it at my firm because we've got a conference space that's plenty big enough. It's on Montgomery Street. It's right off of BART. It's very convenient. So think about that.
Okay.
And then 2, I'd love to know from Leah what the thought process is. I assume it's cost cutting, but would love to know what the backdrop is to it.
Yeah, I think it certainly is cost. So not having in-person meetings has saved us almost $1 million a year. And, when we think about things like funding a panel for defense council representation, right? We aren't getting any new money from the legislature for that or any other initiative we might want to undertake. So there's a very real kind of practical fiscal analysis that's gone into it. And I would say that's one. But also there are sub-entity members and members of the public who value and appreciate the Zoom meeting format, because what we've heard is it increases access. It's more flexibility. Certainly when we're trying to increase the diversity of who is on our committees, not just, from a racial and ethnic perspective, but from an income perspective, everybody can't just take a day off and fly somewhere and go to a meeting. So there are some other benefits to this format aside from just fiscal, but fiscal is a reality. And so I've been really clear with the board that I think it would be a mistake to just revert back to what we did before, because the economics of it just are pretty compelling. That being said, what I left out of the email inadvertently is this presumes that we have the statutory authority to continue in this way, because pre-COVID, everybody had to notice their location if they were not attending the meeting in person. People don't want to notice their home or their office location. That requirement was eliminated with COVID, and that provision has been extended through March of this year. All indications are it's going to become permanent, because if we're saving $1 million a year, the state writ large is saving real money this way. So I think it will be extended, but this is predicated on that. And then Sarah, to your point, just understand that our meetings do have to be public. So if you offer up your office for a meeting, you have to offer it up for members of the public as well. So when we have an in-person meeting, we have to give the public the opportunity to attend in person. And so the meetings, they would be in our Los Angeles office. Obviously the travel is funded, and that it sounds like it would be twice a year instead of once a year that you guys would all be together. But then 2 of the meetings per year would be remote for your particular group under this thought process.
Leah, I have a question. Obviously the state's thought about continuing a hybrid kind of meeting thing where you can have an in-person meeting, but also have the Zoom meeting available?
Right. So for those 2 that would be in person, we would allow that, but we wouldn't do, say all meetings could be hybrid. But for the 2, yeah, so there could be. I think the idea and the hope is that if there's just 2 a year that are in person, everybody does attend, because I recognize there's value in all coming together, but there would be the hybrid option.
I'm sorry, Leah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
it's fine. I think it's good. It's tough. It's kind of, the discussions we're having with our own staff about coming back, and we aren't going to go back to 5 days a week in the office. We just, for the vast majority of staff, and So things change and you just kind of try to find the right balance.
I guess for my part, I love in-person things. There's really no substitute for it. But I do think that the cost considerations that Leah mentions are real. And I can see that, there are other probably better uses for the money than doing 4 in-person meetings. And I love the accessibility point that Leah raised about doing it via Zoom, makes it kind of more accessible to the public and to others. So I think I'm okay with the proposal. I also think, unfortunately, the way of the world is hybrid meetings in the future. We're never going to go back to it all in person. So in any event, I don't really disagree with what we're being asked to do. But, I recognize people have different perspectives on this, and I respect that.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else have thoughts on it? I didn't know, Heather didn't offer Disneyland yet, so I was waiting for that, or, ESPN Zone or someplace.
I was going to say my new office might not be far from there. I just wanted to say I haven't had an opportunity to meet with all of you as long as I've been on COAF. I did the one LA meeting with the Southern California people, but I haven't had an opportunity to be in the room with the entire COAF yet. So I am chomping at the bit on anything that would allow us to be able to do that. Obviously, it's convenient for me because I'm in Los Angeles, but I also support the proposal as it is, especially if it means twice a year I'd get to see everyone in person. So, and for all the reasons that for the flexibility, I think that's great too, for the Zoom portions of it. So components of it.
Thanks, Heather. It's true. Heather and I and Sal have been on COAF together for coming up on 3 years. And Sal and Elizabeth are the only people I've ever met in person. And Heather and Heather and I have worked together for almost 3 years on stuff, and we've never been in the same room together. So it really would be nice.
And I met Elizabeth because I went up there to go.
Right. It would be nice to be in a room with all of you again. And I know, and again, some of you we've never sat in a room together. As Michael and I are on like 5 things together all the time, and we've never sat in a room together. And Sarah and I aren't that far away, and we never sat in a room together. So anybody else have thoughts on that? I just we wanted to get consensus from everybody. But to your point, Leah said it, and Heather too. I mean, this is actually one more time in person than we would have had otherwise. So it doesn't feel so terrible for COAF. I'm guessing Leah might get pushback from sub entities that meet a lot more than we do. But anybody else have any thoughts? Okay, then Ryan and I will respond to to Leah and to the board by just saying that COAF understands all the reasons why this is a good idea, and COAF has no objection to meeting twice a year in person in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Do I get
probably swing inviting the public, by the way, to the offices, but so the offer is still on the table. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, we can entertain that. I don't know if there's everyone has to go to San Francisco to Sarah's office. I'm still waiting for Disneyland, Heather. I didn't hear you throw that out. But okay, whatever. Fine.
Call Bob Chapek. I'll get right on that.
Come on now.
Disney World would be great too, Heather.
I don't think Leo's going to authorize a flight. Southwest doesn't fly. Oh, it does, I guess. Okay. Does anybody have anything else before I let us all go and adjourn today's meeting? Nobody? Anybody? I really appreciate everybody's thoughtful comments and all the hard work that you all are doing. And of all of the things that I do, this is my favorite group because of just the energy and the time that folks are putting in to making the California pool of lawyers better. So thank you all. It is a pleasure to see you all on Zoom. And maybe, just maybe, the next time we see each other, it will be around a table together. Fingers crossed. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
And do I have to officially adjourn the meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You just have to adjourn us. You don't need a motion.
All right, good. All right, then, by the power vested in me by Elizabeth, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. Have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you all soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Heather, you owe me an email.
I emailed you.
I didn't get it.
Oh, I'll resend it. Okay.
Resend it. Did you?